based on fear, and it says, of two most important matters, there is no mention. There is not a word about masturbation. Now, Kevin was talking about how Reich openly talks about masturbation back in 1931. And when I saw this, there's not a word about masturbation, I thought we should make some connections with the present here. And one thing that quickly came to mind is someone whose name may ring a bell, Dr. Jocelyn Elders. And as you may recall, I can't seem to find my papers here. As you may recall, Elders was Clinton's pick for Surgeon General. And to my knowledge, she was the first black woman who was in the role of Surgeon General. Does that sound right to you all?
Yeah.
And what happened with Elders? Now, how can someone be so well organized as I am and not find what I want? Here it is. Right on my notes. What happened with Elders is in 1994, she attends a UN World AIDS Conference. And the first question that they ask her, this is a funny question, they asked her if masturbation might be taught as a way to prevent AIDS. So here you have Reich openly talking about masturbation back in 31 or 32, sexual struggle of youth. You have the editorial saying, Crombie stuff, he doesn't even mention masturbation. How is this going to be sex education? And now we have Elders, so I want to tie things into the present, or near present. This is still 15 years ago. And so masturbation might be taught as a way of preventing AIDS. I presume the argument would be that if people engage in mutual masturbation rather than intercourse, there would be less likely the spread of HIV. I'm not exactly sure what's behind the question, but it's something like that. And Elders replies, masturbation is something that is part of human sexuality. Wow. And it's part of something that perhaps should be taught. She's fired virtually the next day by Clinton for saying this. So here you have someone saying something as mild as masturbation is something that is a part of human sexuality and perhaps might be taught. She had also advocated distributing condoms in schools, and she had raised questions about decriminalizing certain drug laws. Not terribly unreasonable ideas. She became viciously attacked by the right wing, and she loses her position. When Reich first got the pamphlets of Crombie's and wrote his little reply, which gets circulated to the JCCs and which leads to them canceling the order, he turned him over to this study group. So there was a study group of people. Lois Weibel, who worked for Reich's press, was part of it, this woman Helen Haskell and others. And they would basically just sit around and read Reich material. When he turns over the pamphlets to them and says to them, he sort of says, maybe you can do something about this. I think the actual charge was, the pamphlets, Dr. Reich raised the question, what could be done about such things as these sex-negative pamphlets? And this group, this study group, decides, well, what we can do is at least warn people about them. But to do that, we're going to need a letterhead. And so they create something called the Committee for Self-Regulation. They get a number of the psychotherapists to become like advisors to them. So Dr. Raphael was an advisor, Dr. Baker, Dr. Cott, and Dr. Duval. And those who know the intricate histories of the ergonomic family will know this is an interesting collection of advisors. They come together now as a formal group called the Committee for Self-Regulation, and they actually have a publication towards self-regulation, a report for the Committee the Committee of Self-Regulation. Note the date is December 49. Remember, that's when Reich started the OIRC. So you get a sense that at the same time they're studying the healthy child, they also want to do something about teenagers. And of course, there's no telling where these organizations would have gone had Reich not had to put tremendous amount of energy and interest into something else, namely fighting the Food and Drug Administration. which really destroyed her. So, this idea of, you sometimes think, well, people are giving Mildred Brady too much credit here. No. Mildred Brady really brought down the house with that article in the New Republic and the way that article was used. But in any case, the folks come together as the Committee for Self-Regulation. They take on this strong stance to prevent Crombie's literature from being distributed. That's why Helen Haskell sends it to Psychiatric Quarterly. They publish their editorial. Some people in the committee say, well, why are we being so negative? Let's do something positive. And they say, well, we'll write some real good pamphlets. And they realize they can't. They said, what we can do is recommend Reich's work and Neal's work and stuff that had occurred in the IJSO. Unfortunately, there was no English translation yet of The Sexual Rights of Youth. That would have been an interesting thing to distribute, but they decide, and their thinking is kind of interesting. They say, well, you want to do something positive, and Lois Weibel had this good analogy. It's vitally important to stop the spread of poison, even though it may be more constructive to offer wholesome food. And, I think we can resonate with that. One of the things about the Decent Living pamphlet, well, first, Crombie's thing on juvenile delinquency is, remember, if you flip back over to Crombie, the first thing is this pamphlet on juvenile delinquency. This is Helen Haskell. Of the 7 specific delinquent acts which he mentions, Crombie, 5 of them are sexual or have to do with sex. Unmarried mothers, abortion, divorce, etc. Further on in the pamphlet, the feeling is expressed that such sex crimes are the worst of all delinquent acts. So you get a sense of this Crombie was really a plague character. He was really couldn't tolerate sexuality. Moreover, in Decent Living, and this should ring a bell, this is Haskell reporting on it. Decent living could be regarded as an attempt to terrify young people into remaining abstinent. Some of the weapons of fear used are syphilis, gonorrhea, death, pregnancy, loss of popularity, loss of prestige and position in society, loss of one's finer feelings, lost respect for the opposite sex, and a faith in oneself, prostitution, and lifelong misery. That's what's going to happen if you have sex, if you're a teenager. And, well, then the hair on the hands, too, presumably. And here I want to pause and think about what Crombie was trying to do was frighten teenagers into being abstinent until marriage. And this is the kind of thing that Kevin talked about, The choices were abstinence till marriage or... Well, along comes someone named George Bush. And actually, this began under Clinton, where there was federal laws demanding that any federal money that went into sex education had to be into abstinence-only education. And here is definitions from Title V. And I did some research on this. I couldn't get enough because it's also so disgusting. But Title V is part of the Department of Education funding, product. They usually do them under titles. Like Title IX is for discrimination in sports, right? Sex discrimination, and there's various. So Title V, and here, if you're going to distribute sex information, it has to do this. Has as its exclusive purpose, this is right out of Title V, has as its exclusive purpose teaching the social, psychological, and health gains to be realized by abstaining from sexual activity. Teaches abstinence from sexual activity outside of marriage is the expected standard for school-age children. Sexual abstinence outside of marriage is the standard, the expected standard for school-age children. By the way, they can get married. You can get married as young as you want in this country with your parents' permission. You can get married at 12 and witness those unfortunate LDFS stuff that's going on in Texas. That's legal. May seem rather immoral to us, but it is certainly legal for 12-year-olds to be married off if they have their parents' permission. Then there, in addition to Title V, there's something called the Community-Based Abstinence Education Bill. And again, this is federal money you can get if your education, if your information meets these requirements, teaches in an age-appropriate manner, that abstinence is the only